On page 44, B. We've turned the page to 44B. The Gemara has been talking about the mitzvah of Arava. Arava was a unique mitzvah in the Beis Hamikdash, and the Gemara had a discussion. What exactly was the ikar, the main part of the Arava mitzvah? Was it the waving of the Arava? It was willow. Arava means willows. And did they wave the willow or walk, do the encircle? They did like an encirclement of the mizbeach, of the altar, or was it placing the willows and leaning them over the on the altar, and then they would sort of like bend over, or the tops of them would bend over as well. They would be long aravis. So the question was the zakifa the mitzvah, or was it the going around with them the mitzvah? And that was a discussion that we had. We also spoke about kohen balmum, the kohen that has a blemish. Would he be allowed to do the mitzvah of Arava? This was a discussion, Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish. The Gemara had talked about as well the mitzvah of Arava. If this mitzvah is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, is it a law given to Moses at Sinai that they would do whatever this mitzvah was, which again is a subject of discussion, what exactly Arava is. But is that a mitzvah that's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai if it was given to Moses at Sinai? Or is it a takanas hanavim, a decree by the prophets? Or is it a minhag navim? Is it a custom of the prophets? And that was the Gemara on 44a, and then it ended on the top of 44b, that top line, kan b'migdash, kan b'gvulin, which really is a subject of the discussion among the commentaries. But the way Rashi understands it is in the Beis Hamikdash, it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai that they would take the lulav in the Mikdash, and the when we say that it's a takanas neviim, when we say that it's a decree of the prophets, that which is a machlokes, but the opinion that says it's a decree of the prophets and not just a minhag of the prophets, that's talking about the outside of the Beis Hamikdash, that it was a decree that the prophets established that we should be taking the lulav, even not by the Beis Hamikdash. Now, the Gemara before that had mentioned that this is a case maybe of shakchum v'chazru v'yastum. Shakchum v'chazru v'yastum is a term the Gemara uses in various places, referring to a case where there was a halacha in such a law, and then it got forgotten, and then it was reestablished by the rabbis. But the way Rashi learns here is that the Gemara retracts from that. And the Gemara says that really here, it's not such a case. It's a difference between in the time of in the place of the Beis Hamikdash, by the Beis Hamikdash, or outside of the Beis Hamikdash. That's really what the difference is. We're going to start on the top of page 44b, and the top line over here. Amar Reb Ami. Reb Ami says, Arava tzricha shir. So 44b, the top must be in the art scroll 44b1. And the top line. Amar Reb Ami says, Arava tzricha shir. Arava needs a certain amount in order to fulfill the mitzvah. For this mitzvah of Arava, again, we're not talking about the Aravas of the lulav. We're not talking about the willows that go in the lulav. We're talking about the other mitzvah of Arava, which we are familiar with mainly from Hoshana Rabbah. We also do it every day. We do Hoshanos, but Hoshana Rabbah, we actually carry Aravos. We do something with the Aravos. We bang them on the floor, hold them, and bang them on the floor. So the mitzvah of Arava, so the Gemara says, Rabami says, Arava tzricha shir. It has a certain amount. And ve'ena nitelas ela b'fnei atzma. And the only way you could fulfill the mitzvah is if it's taken by itself. It's not taken only by itself. You can't have something else inside that bundle. And the reason would be that we have to make it recognizable that this is for the mitzvah. It's for the mitzvah of Arava. And if you would take something else, it would not be clear that it's for the mitzvah. Maybe looks like you're doing it for some other medicine purposes or other purpose. Now, the third thing he says, you do not fulfill the obligation if you use the arava that's connected to the lulav and you just take the lulav with you. That you would not fulfill the mitzvah of arava. And the reason is because that looks like you're just taking the lulav mitzvah. It doesn't look like this is the arava mitzvah. Now, the Gemara says, what is this second law and third law? Don't they seem redundant? Meaning the second law seems obvious. You can only take it itself. So obviously you can't use the lulav one. So Gemara says, Kivan de Amar Mar, since Master Rabami, you just said, Einon to tell us Ela b'fnei atzma, the second law. Now, the first law was Arava needs a shear. We'll soon see what that means. It has a certain amount. But then it's the second law was it's Einon tell us Ela b'fnei atzma. It can only be taken by itself without anything else with it, at least inside a for sure, it can't be attached with something else inside bundled with something else. You can't have something else with bundled. Then you have the third law of Ein Adam Yetzi Dechavasi Ba'Arava Shabbalulav. You can't use the arava that's in the lulav. And in other words, you would take the lulav with the arava in it. That wouldn't be good. So the Gemara says, since you just said that you can't take anything else with it, Shita, obviously, you cannot be fulfilling the mitzvah with the lulav that has aravis, because then you would not be clearly doing it for the mitzvah of arava. So the Gemara says, yeah, mahu de tema, you might have said, hani mili, when does it apply that you can't fulfill the mitzvah? When you include other things, that's if you don't lift it up twice. But if you do lift it up twice, you lift it up once and then lift it up a second time. So, I would say, in such a case, maybe you did fulfill the mitzvah of arava, because by doing it a second time, maybe it is recognizable that you're doing it for another mitzvah. And the Gemara says, Kamash Malan, so Rabbi Ami comes and lets us hear that by doing it a second time, you would not fulfill the mitzvah for Arava. Now, what about if you take it out and if you would take out the Aravas that are in the lulav and use those for if you want to take out the aravas that are in the lulav. I once had a problem, actually. I bought aravas for his Shana Rabbah, and they asked me to daven for the Yamud. So I took my I had my talis and my siddur. I walked up to daven for the Yom, and I left my lulav and my hashanis on the table. Well, I come back for Hallel to get my lulav and esrog, and there's no hashanis there. Someone took my hashanis. So and you know they didn't sell hashanis like some shuls have like the extra hashanis they're selling. This shul didn't have it. So I'm there helping them out, davening for the Yomid over there. Hoshana Rabbah is not an easy shot. And sure enough, someone stole my Yoshanas. I guess they didn't know. They thought, I don't know, whatever. But anyway, bottom line is I wasn't able to bang it. I had to wait till I got home and figured out how to get another Yoshanas. But anyway, the thing is that it would seem that maybe I could have taken from the lulav. Because you can't use the lulav and you can't shake the lulav a second time. That's what our Gemara just says. I mean, we have the other opinion here, I should say. Rav Chizda Amar Rabbi Yitzchok. Rav Chizda says the name of Yitzchok. Adam Yotzi Dechavasi Bar Rav Lulav. You could actually go and shake it again. So there is an opinion that says it's acceptable. Again, Rabbi Ami says you can't, but Ein Adam Yotzi Dechavasi Bar Rav Lulav. But Rav Chizda seems to argue. He says Adam Yotzi Dechavasi Bar Rav Lulav. You could do it, but anyway. But according to everyone, if you take out the aravas of the lulav, there does seem to be such an option that you could fulfill the mitzvah with these aravas. It's not 100% clear, but there is discussion about it. The Meiri seems to argue and says you can't, but the Bikuri Yaakov says you can, and seemingly that would be at least the B'diavad an option. Just take your lulavs out of your aravis out of your lulav, and you would be able to, and maybe get if you want to do 5, get your friends aravis as well from his lulav, and which we'll soon see about 5 because the Gemara does mention different numbers. But anyway, bottom line is that there does seem to be such an option of taking the aravis of the lulav if you separate it and just hold the aravis. Yes, Mordechai.
Yes, in Beis Levi Yitzchok, they frequently ask me to daven shacharis from the Amud on Shabbos, and it's always interesting to see what's missing from my table when I get back to my seat here.
It's like a setup. Yes, Jeffrey.
So good to see you. The only issue seems to be connected to the shiur, because right, Rabi, Arava, Sricha shiur, right? They need to tell us the option. So it seems like the issue of using the aravas that are with the lulav is only a matter of whether there's enough of them, right? Because we only generally use 2.
Okay, so about the amount that you need. That's right. The next exact little piece is Tamashiura.
Exactly.
But that doesn't really answer the problem because really, just you have 2 in yours, but the guy next to you also has 2. So could you use 2 of yours with the other guy's 2? And maybe you want to use the third guy's 1, and this way you have 5 if you want to.
Can you hold them, all 3 of you together at the same time?
What is that?
And maybe you can, all 3 of you, hold the package together at the same time.
Oh, you're really trying to cut corners here. Can 2 people hold the lulav together and shake it at the same time? Well, the problem there would be you don't own it. But on the first, that would be a problem on the first day. What about on the other days? You don't have to own it. So would you be allowed to shake it together with someone else on the other days? A few people in one shot. And can you bang it? Can you 2 people buy haishanis and just bang them together and fulfill the mitzvah? I've never seen it done that way. I would assume it's not the acceptable way to do it. But I have to think about it and see if anyone talks about it. But it's definitely not the common, that's not commonly done that way. It's definitely not even rarely done that way. I've never seen it. But anyway, so the taking the aravis out of the lulav. So the Meiri writes that you can't fulfill even if you take it out. It has to be it can't be taken out because it's hukza lemitzvasa. He says this is the term he uses.
Mhm.
It's already set aside for the mitzvah of lulav. You can't now use it for go take it out of that purpose and use it for another mitzvah. What he implies is that if you don't take it out, but you're just lifting up your lulav a second time, you might think that could work. But for sure, if you take it out, then it's a problem because it's huksa l'mitzvah. How could you go and separate it when it's meant for the lulav? That is like a for sure problem. To shake it a second time, to lift it up a second time, and you have in mind for a rava, it's not good because it has to be taken on its own. But to remove it, it's huksa l'mitzvah. That is like it's set aside for its mitzvah. You can't go and separate it for the purpose of using it on its own. Now, but there's a Bikurei Yaakov and a Birkas Avram. They prove that if you do take it out, you fulfill the mitzvah, and they have a proof from our Gemara. And what is their proof? The proof is the Gemara had asked. Gemara said Pshita. Since you said it's Einani Telas Eila B'fnei Atzma, obviously you can't fulfill it with the arava of the lulav. So the Gemara is understanding it that it's obvious you can't fulfill with the arava of the lulav. Why? Because the arava of the lulav is part of a group of other species. And that's why it's obvious. It has to be taken on its own. It can't be taken with the inside from a bundle. Now, if you want to say that you're also not allowed to take it out of the lulav, then it's not pshita. It's not for sure. It's not obvious anymore because it says, "Eino nitelas ela b'fnei atzma." That's taken on its own, its own entity. And then it says, and you can't take the rabbis out of the lulav bundle and use them separately. Now, is that pshita? Is that obvious? No. The first statement is you can't. It has to be taken on its own, which basically would mean you can't use a lulav mixed with the hadassim and the aravas. You can't go and use that as your arava mitzvah. Now, could you take it out? That would be the third law. No, you can't take it. And because the Gemara doesn't understand it that way, the Gemara says, Pshita, obviously you can't use that rub of the lulav. So the Gemara is understanding in the way the Bikurei Yaakov and Birkas Avram, they understand from our Gemara. You see, if the Gemara asks Pshita, obviously it's understanding that the case is that they're bundled together, and that's why it's Pshita, that's why it's obvious. And if you were to separate it, then the Gemara should not be asking pshita. We shouldn't be asking it's obvious because this is not obvious. You separated it. It's not part of a bundle, and then it wouldn't be any problem. So this is the proof that it should be kosher if you do separate it. And the reason why it should be kosher is because it's recognizable that it's for arava, that you're doing it for the mitzvah of arava and not for the, you're not doing it because of lulav, you're doing it for the arava because you separated it already from the bundle. Now the question is, what is this concept that it's hukza lemitzvasa? So the Meiri had learned that you would not be allowed to take the lulav and remove the aravos from the lulav and use them for the mitzvah of arava. Why can't you separate the aravos from the lulav? The Meiri says, well, that would be a problem because of huksa lemitzvasa. It's separated for its mitzvah. It's in your mind, you've separated it for the mitzvah. The Birchas Avram says that's not a problem. That's by a type of, that's by food. That's by a that would be an issue of eating or hana. Mitzvahs aren't for benefit, and that should not be an issue to use it for a. In other words, you're not allowed to get benefit. Once something's set aside for the mitzvah, you shouldn't be benefiting from it. I'm not benefiting from it. I'm doing it for an arava purpose. I'm doing it for a mitzvah purpose. Now, so what does the Meiri mean? So the thought maybe that the Meiri has is, why is this a problem? Because the Meiri is following the logic that if this is only a minhag, then it's not a mitzvah. If it's only a custom, it's not a mitzvah. And then you have a problem that it's huksa lemitzvasa, it's set aside for the mitzvah, and you're benefiting from it because you're fulfilling a minhag. If you were fulfilling an obligation, then we could say, well, mitzvahs lav lahanis nitnu. Mitzvahs are not meant for your personal, you're not personally benefiting from it. Instead, Hashem is enjoying your mitzvah. You're not personally benefiting from it because it's mitzvahs aren't for personal benefit. And so there's no concept of huksa lemitzvasa. So could you use a arava that's in the lulav and separate it and then use that for your aravas? Seemingly you could, because here I'm fulfilling a obligation with aravas, and even if you want to tell me huksa lemitzvasa, that means I can't go benefit from the aravas. I shouldn't go and make some medicinal herb from the aravas because I'm benefiting from the aravas. But can I use it for a mitzvah, an obligation? Yeah, I could. But then maybe if you say that it's a minhag, you could say maybe then we could understand the Meiri that it's that it would be a problem of huksa lemitzvasa because I'm only fulfilling a minhag, so it's really more of a personal benefit. And then you could say maybe that's why you wouldn't be allowed to use it. But the Bikurei Yaakov and Birchas Avram seem to hold that it's fine, it's not an issue, and it's okay to use the aravos of the lulav. And so what comes out from here is, in my scenario where someone took my hashanus, I should have just taken my aravos out of my lulav, asked my friends for their aravos, and fulfilled the mitzvah right there and then.
Well, you have the problem that somebody else might need to use the lulav the same day.
Right.
We saw a story that as soon as they finished marching the 7 times, that they put down their lulav and they took it apart, and the children ate the esrogim. And there's a good example for the Meiri to say, we're using it for the mitzvah, but now we have it for personal benefit. And we're not going to use the lulav anymore because it's the end of the period of using the lulav.
Right. Well, you got to ask the question further. What happens after you use it for hashanahs? Can you then take it back for the lulav?
Well, we do every day. We march every day with the hashanahs, and then we use it the next day.
Okay. So l'chayra, it's not a problem. You could lend it to someone for the hashanahs, and then take it back for your lulav.
Yeah, so I don't know if hashanahs is a separate.
If you rip off all the leaves, that could be a problem. But if most hashanahs, they're not so successful. Most times when you bang it on the ground, you're not so successful to remove all the leaves. And it would still be kosher, seemingly, unless they weren't changed. Okay, so bottom line is we have a discussion among the commentaries about using the aravos if you remove them from the lulav. Our Gemara did not talk about that. Our Gemara talked about using the aravos that are inside the lulav without detaching them. While they're still there, using them together with the lulav and esrog, even if you lift it a second time, the Gemara says that you would not fulfill the mitzvah of the arava. And the reason being that, it's not recognizable that this is the Arava mitzvah. It looks like the Lulav mitzvah. And so Rabami had said these three halachas. Now the Gemara tells us that I should just clarify one thing also, that I mentioned Rabami, but there's also Rav Chizda who does say you could use it while it's connected to the Lulav. And Rav Chizda said the name of Yitzchok that you could be Yoitza, your obligation with the Arava, Sheba Lulav, the Arava. In the Lulav, you would fulfill your obligation. It's interesting, the Gemara does say, B'yom tov harishon shel chag.
Yeah.
And the Maharam removes it because what is he really referring to? Now, the first day, the mitzvah of Arava is really on Hoshana Rabbah. It's the seventh day. Now, if he's talking about in the Beis Hamikdash, they would use the lulav every day, and they would do the Hoshanas every day. So what does it mean? The B'yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag. So he removes those words. But anyway, the bottom line is that Rav Chizda holds you could fulfill the mitzvah with the Arava Shebelulav. Rab Ami had his three halachas, so one of them was that you cannot. And we just mentioned that there is a machlokes if you're allowed to take it out from your lulav and use it. We have a proof from our Gemara, because the Gemara says pshita. That implies that the Gemara understood that if you take it out from your lulav, then there's no problem. It's only an issue of using it with the other aravos that are the other items that are in the eged, in the binding, and that would be a problem, at least according to Rab Ami. Now the Gemara says Rab Ami had said that arava needs a amount. It has a shear, a measurement. The kama shiura, the Gemara says. So what is the measurement? Rav Nachman shloisha badei olin lachin. Rav Nachman says, you know how much aravos you need for Hishana, for the Hishanas, Hishana Rabbah? You need three badei olin lachin, three fresh stems that have fresh leaves. And the leaves go throughout the stem. Now, Rashi over here, sheyesh b'chol echad alen lachem. Rashi says that all of these stems, all of these branches have fresh leaves. However, on the side, they bring from Rashi on the Rif that there's one more word there, that all of these three stems have three fresh leaves. So if it just says fresh leaves, it sounds like the whole thing should have fresh leaves. If it says that each of these three need three fresh leaves, it sounds like all you need is three. Each of the stems have three fresh leaves, like maybe three would be good enough. So this seems to be a question of what Rashi's opinion is. Is the word shloisha correct or not correct? Now, on the Rif, the Rashi has the word shloisha. On the Gemara, Rashi doesn't have the word shloisha. So anyway, that would be a question of what the opinion of Rav Nachman is. Now, Rav Sheisha Samar, Rav Sheisha says, Afilu ola echad ubad echad. Rav Sheisha says, even one stem and one leaf, Allah is a leaf, ubad echad, in one stem. So you have one branch, one leaf, and then you also have a branch not connected. So Gemara says, really? Allah echad ubad echad salkadaitok? You really mean that? You hold a leaf and you hold a stem and that's good enough. So Gemara says, no. You can fulfill the mitzvah even by taking one stem. And as long as that one stem has one leaf on it, that would be good enough. Now, Rashi is bothered. He says the Gemara before on page 32 said that you need 3 handbreadths. And the arava needs to be shloisha tvachim. So Rashi says that is legabe lulav, relative by the lulav, that arava needs 3 tfachim, 3. But arava that they would use, but that they would go around and circle the mizbeach, kol dehu sagi, says any size is good enough. He says, but now we have a minute to use long ones to do the mitzvah, the ayin yafa, with a good eye, that it's recognizable that you're doing the mitzvah nicely. But according to halacha, it says you really could get away with a tiny, like there's no real measure of how big the arava has to be. Now that is the way Rashi learns. The Ran the Ran basically says that it's the same measure as the aravos. That the Gemara is not discussing. The Gemara is discussing how many you need, but the measure would be the same as the aravos of the lulav. So you would need the 3 handbreadths. I remember when we used to cut the aravos in the field, so we would have a stick that was the exact measure that the owner of the fields wanted us to cut them to. And he, of course, he was careful because of this Ran. According to Rashi, you could get away with tiny little. Get away with the small aravas, but the Ran holds it's the same measure as the aravas of the lulav, and therefore.
Okay. Yeah, stop the video.
Put it back. I'm going away.
Sorry about that. So,
Let you go.
Back
the measurement.
Put it back on.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the measurement would be that the same, according to the Ran, as the lulav aravos. Now, so Rashi said that you need 3. And they have to be fresh. And we discussed, does he need each one? Do they have to have a lot of leaves or just 3 leaves? Fine, that's a question in Rashi. Now, And the Gemara now says that there's a machlokes that we talked about before, machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Yochanan, if it's a minhag neviim or if it's a yesoid neviim. Is it a custom or is it a decree of the neviim? Okay, so here comes the Gemara. Amar Ivu. Ivu is the father of Rav. Ivu said, now, Ivu said, I was standing in front of Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik. And a person came and he brought an arava. Shakil chavit chavit. Shakil, he took it. He brought this Rabbi Elazar bar Tzaddik an arava. He took it. Chavit chavit. And he either waved it, which is one translation of chavit, or the Rambam learns he banged it, the other translation. that he banged it on the ground or on top of something. Now, so v'loy baruch, and he did not recite a bracha for doing this mitzvah of Arava. So the Gemara says, Kasavar, because he holds that minhag neviim hu, this is not an obligation, this is only a custom, and because it's only a custom, therefore you do not recite a bracha on a custom. And if it was an obligation, even if it was an obligation of the rabbis, you would say a bracha on it, because a obligation of the rabbis does fall in the category of asher kedeshanu b'mitzvaysav. Hashem commanded us with his mitzvahs. And what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is lo sasur, don't go against what the rabbis teach you. Lo sasur ben adav sheyigidu lecha yamin usmail, that you're not allowed to go against what the rabbis have taught you, and therefore you could say Hashem commanded us with his mitzvahs. And but if it's only a minhag, then you have a problem saying asher kedeshanu b'mitzvahs. If he commanded us with his mitzvahs, we didn't really have a command. So therefore, it would make sense then not to say a bracha on a minhag. Now, the question that this Gemara brings up is that's brought up in the commentaries based on this Gemara is, what about tomorrow? Tomorrow we say hallow. And what about on Tuesday? We also say hallow. And the hallow that we say is a half hallow. And the half hallow is seemingly only a minhag. We learned that in the previous Gemara in Tainus mentioned, I was a little surprised. I saw them saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, but then I saw that they skipped. The Gemara says, the Gemara mentions this story. I saw they skipped. Okay, it's a minhag avisayim. They have a minhag avisayim. It's only a minhag. So the thing is that our Gemara seems pretty clear that if it's only a minhag, then you don't say a bracha on it. So is it possible to say a bracha on Hallel? And so this is the topic of discussion. You got a nice big Tosfos over here that talks about it, and other commentaries, and comes out that the minhag Ashkenazim is to say a bracha, and different ways of differentiating between basically what you're going to need to differentiate is why by Arava do we not say a bracha, and why by Hallel do we say a bracha. That's what you're going to have to differentiate. You'll also have to differentiate between Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius, that Yom Tov Sheni, on the second day of Yom Tov, we say Asher Kedeshanu b'mitzvaysav. We do say brachas on the different mitzvahs of the day, of the second day of Yom Tov, shofar, blowing the shofar, shaking the lulav. We have all the brachas that are recited, even though it's second day of Yom Tov is also considered minhag avisayim b'yadeim, even though we have a calendar, but we follow the minhag. And so seemingly you would have to differentiate between these these different laws. The minhag of saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, which is part of our tradition, but it's based on a minhag. The minhag of Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius, and the verses Arava, which is also a minhag. Arava seems obvious that if it's a minhag, you don't say a bracha. In the other cases, Ashkenazic Jews say bracha, at least, so it's a topic of discussion. One of the points that the commentaries bring is that there's a difference between something that has sort of like a basis of a mitzvah. Like this is, the mitzvahs. Hallel is a mitzvah anyway. It's Torah. So it's, even if you don't want to say there's an obligation to say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. It's only a minhag, but still, it's still words of Torah. So you could still say that you could say Asher Kedushanu b'mitzvaysav is a mitzvah to learn Torah, so it's part of that mitzvah, or it's considered an act of a mitzvah. Even if Hashem didn't command it now, He commands it in general. There is such a command, so you could say that is that there is such a mitzvah, even though it's not necessarily applying to this specific recital. Anyway, that's one of the discussion, one of the points that are brought up. Now the Gemara continues and says, "Ivu v'chizkiya b'nei brate derav." Now we have another Ivu, and this is a different Ivu. This is the b'nei brate, the sons of the daughter of Rav. So Rav's grandchildren. One of them was Ivu, and the other one was Chizkiya. I guess he was named after his great-grandfather. So, Aisu Arava l'kamei de Rav. They brought an Arava in front of Rav. In Chavit, he did whatever the word Chavit means. He either waved it or he banged it on the floor. And V'loi Barich, but he did not recite a bracha. Kasavar minag neviim, who he also, just like his father, we said, held as a minhag neviim. He also holds that this is a minhag neviim, and it's not a yesod neviim. It's a minhag of the prophets that they did this. They encouraged people to do it, but they didn't obligate you. They didn't say you have to. Oh, it's a minhag neviim, so you don't say a bracha on it. Okay. It's not an obligation. You don't say a bracha. You can't say Asher Kedushanu b'mitzvaysav. He commanded us with his mitzvahs. Now comes this story. Amar Ivu. Ivu said, I was standing in front of Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok. Person came in front of him, in front of Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok, to ask him like a shayla. Amar lei. So the man says as follows. Kirya is a city or a neighborhood, like a village. Kiryasa Isli, I have villages. Karmaya Isli, I have vineyards. Zeisaya Isli, I have olive trees. And Va'asu b'nei Kiryasa, and the people from my villages, they come. Umakashkashin be'karmaya, and they hoe the vineyard on Shemitah. Now, va'oichlin b'zeisaya, and they eat the olives, and seemingly the eating of the olives is like payment for the work they did on the vineyards. Now, he asks Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok, arech or lo yarech? Is this good or is it not good? So Amar le lo yarech. He says, no, it's not good. You're paying your workers from the fruit of Shemitah, and the Torah says that you're not allowed to use it for such purposes. It's meant to eat, not for scheda, not for business. You're not allowed to do that. And the hoeing, that's not what we're dealing with. That's okay. But the what you would call it, the payment, that's a problem. Now, Amar, so I'm sorry, he says lo yarech havakoshavik le v'azil. So the person left Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok, and he went on his way. He took off. So Amar, Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok said, "Oh, kadu havesi dairi bara hoda arbon shnin." I have been living I've already been living here 40 years in this land. And I didn't see bar inesh mahalach ba'archon, a person that goes ba'archon desaknon kadein, that goes on a way that's straight like this. In other words, this guy seems very sincere, very impressed with him. Commentaries discuss what exactly is he impressed with, that he left right away. He wanted to fix it. He wanted to correct what was going on. There's also a discussion, was this really halachically obligated? Because he didn't really make up with the workers. You are getting paid from the Shemitah produce. It was almost like, they worked there, they took. So maybe it was something that was self-understood without being verbalized, but that doesn't necessarily make it prohibited. So, so seemingly, if you want to learn this way, that it was really permissible. And so what's going on in the Gemara, in this story, is that the man knows it's permissible, and he's asking if it's arech or loyar. Is this the appropriate way to do it? I know it's allowed in halacha because I didn't make up with them that they're getting paid. So in other words, you could learn this, that the man himself understands that it's not, that it's halachically allowed, but he wants to know, is this the appropriate thing to do? And on this, Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok tells him, no, it's not appropriate. So he leaves and he's going to fix it. And on this is what Rabbi Elazar bar Tzadok is impressed with, because even though it's acceptable in halacha, what he did was not wrong, but he wanted to follow, he wanted to hear from the rabbis, is this the appropriate thing or not? So anyway, that's one way of learning the Gemara. It's a little unclear if Rashi really understands it this way. Rashi says in this Rashi over here, where he says, V'ochli zeisaya, they eat the zaysim, the olives, and Rashi says that b'schar chafiras hakramim, for payment of the digging of these vineyards, ve'enon makkirin la'aniyim, and they were not mafkir them for the aniyim, for the poor people. So it sounds from Rashi maybe that he held that it's maybe more like prohibited, that this was schar. In other words, is Rashi learning that this is like a 100% payment, or is this was this just like they took it as if they're getting paid, but it wasn't like a clear-cut payment? Again, there are commentaries that learn this way, that it wasn't a prohibition, it was more of a like appropriate way to that you still shouldn't do it.
But which word do we understand that tells us, if we don't read the commentary first, that it's in the Shvius?
I guess you have to understand it that way. I mean, what else is the problem? I don't know.
Well,
I mean, the Gemara afterward. I guess you'll see it from the Gemara right after. You see it right afterwards. From what we did until now, you're right, I guess. But if you wait a line or two, a few lines, you'll soon see it. So
I see Apakher, yeah, later afterwards.
Rabbi,
Efkar or whatever.
yeah, yes, Ezra.
so my question on that situation with the Shvit is, wouldn't the individual have known this, considering that anything that's a product of the seventh year is ownerless, and therefore he can't, especially if it was his, he can't turn around and use it because then that negates the fact that it's supposed to be ownerless?
You're asking the way Rashi seems to say it, that they took these as payment, and he was not making it ownerless. And I was on that point you're questioning, or are you just questioning in general, like how would he even think that this was allowed? You're asking more of a general question. Why would he even think this whole concept would be allowed? Like, but so if you're understanding it the second way, so the understanding seems to be that he wasn't actually paying them. They were taking it as if it's payment, but it wasn't like a clear-cut payment. It's almost like, there's someone offers to help you out in your field, and then there's orange juice right there. Is he paying you? It's almost like it's like a given. You can take it. Is it exactly payment? It seems like a little vague if it's exactly payment or not. But
they're allowed to take it. I mean, because
right. It should be hefker.
But basically what that means is that he hasn't paid them, which is a different avera than what we've said before. Because if they're allowed to take it, no matter what, but that means that they haven't been paid, and so therefore he is basically holding their payment beyond the prescribed time, which in itself is a different thing that he's over on.
So the thing is that he didn't make up with them that they're getting paid. That was the thing. It's sort of like they're just helping out. It's an unclear, unwritten relationship over here. They don't have a contract. Anyway, the Gemara says, what about the actual hoeing? The Gemara says, well, 1 second, let me just see. Did I get up to there? Okay, Hadabasi, the guy came back. Vamalei, my miyavid. What should I do? So what should I do? What should I do now? So Amalei after Zeisaya lachashuchaya. Go be mafkir the olives. Go make them hefker to the chashuchaya. What's the chashuchaya? To the dark ones. What does chashuchaya mean? So it means to the poor people. Rashi says on lanium, and seemingly a little surprising. In other words, hefker is for everyone. What does it mean? Make it hefker, make it ownerless for the poor. When it's ownerless, it's ownerless. So it's a little unclear why he uses this word. Commentaries discuss what that means, but he says make it hefker, make it ownerless, make the olives ownerless. V'sein pritaya l'kashkushe kramim, and give money to these people who who worked who did this work, and then you have no problem at all. So he is encouraging him to pay, but don't give them the olives. So Gemara says, what do you mean they're allowed to do this work? Kashkushe mishari, kashkushe, is this allowed? Are you allowed to do this hoeing on Shemitah? Why is he only worried about the payment? What about the hoeing? Tanya, Vashvias, on the 7th year, Tishmetena Natashta. You should be Tishmetena, you should prevent, you should stop from Mila Kashkesh, from hoeing. Unatashta, and you should hold back Mila Sakel, from picking up the rocks, throwing the rocks out of the field. You should prevent yourself. You should hold back from doing that, from removing the Mila Sakel, from taking the rocks and throwing them out of the field. So how is he allowed to do that? How are the workers allowed to do this? These people came to help him. there's two types of hoeing. Chad stume pili. One type is when you fill the holes in the ground, and the tree is revealed, the roots of the tree are revealed, and so you want to close it up in order that the tree does not get dried out. The roots don't get dried out, so you want to cover over these holes. And the other type is to loosen and shake the earth that's on top of the roots in order for it to be more loose. And that is in order to get the tree to be better. So that's fixing the tree and making it better. So avruye ilani aser. So to make the tree better is a problem. But stume pile shari, but to fill the holes, that would be permissible because you're doing it in order that it shouldn't get worse, in order that it shouldn't get ruined. And there, it wasn't a problem. Therefore, Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok had a problem with the payment, but he didn't have a problem with the actual work. So why does the Gemara bring this story over here? Seemingly because Ivu is the same Ivu. Ivu mentioned this story, and this Ivu was the Ivu that was in front of Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok when he talked about Arava, that they brought an Arava, and he said that he didn't make a bracha. So the Gemara brings another story. Ivu was standing in front of Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok, and this is the story that happened.
Now there'll be another one.
Okay, now comes the next one. Amar Ivu. Ivu says, Mishum Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok. He says in the name of person shouldn't go more than 3 parsa. Parsa is 72-minute travel, so it's more than that amount of distance that a person would travel. 4 mil. 4 mil is like a mil is like 3/4 of a mile. So 4 mil or few miles, so that's a parsa. So the sholish parsois are what, about 7 miles, something like that. So a person shouldn't go on Erev Shabbos. Why? Because in order that he should not have, he should basically relax in order to prepare for Shabbos and prepare the Suda. Now, Amrav Kana loy Amran ela lebese. The Rav Kana says that only applies a person who's coming to his house, and it's going to create a whole problem because he's going to come, they didn't prepare, and so on. He'll get angry at them. Aval ushpize, but if he's going to some type of hotel, an inn, my denakit samach, he's relying on whatever he prepared, and therefore he doesn't have to worry about going a far away place that's more than 3 parsois. Vika da amri, and some say a little differently, and that it specifically applies even to his house. What is it? This doesn't apply of Rebbe Elazar bar Tzadok's halacha about not traveling more than 3 parsois. Ela filu levese, even to his house, where for sure he'll find something to eat. Nevertheless, he shouldn't do this. He shouldn't rely on it. But for sure, if he's going somewhere else, then for sure he might not find anything. For sure, should not be traveling this far on Erev Shabbos. Rav Kana says, I had such a story. I went, I tried, and filo kasa da harsna layashkechi. I didn't even find small fish to eat that they didn't even have.